So Abbie and I have talked a lot over the past few days leading up to this episode about some of our top things that we look for and some of the tools that have helped us the most. And we came up with some examples, and we actually wrote out, we chatted about it, and then I started writing some examples that we're going to share with you guys. And then I was reading them to Abbie, and then we were kind of like critiquing them, and we came up with these story examples that we're going to actually read to you guys. So we're going to share our process for how we take a piece of writing and decide what should stay in dialogue, what should come out of dialogue, what should we add back in after we strip it down. And we're going to take it to that next level of implementing these tools as we go, rather than just telling you these cut and dry tools like, hey, we do this and this. We're actually going to show you how we utilize each one. So the first point that we talked about a lot is finding focus, finding the focus of the conversation when writing dialogue, because every single conversation, just like conversations that happen in real life, there's a point. There is a focal point to that conversation and to the dialogue that's written.
Right. Yeah. And I think that can be something that you as the writer can get distracted on other things when there's a lot going on in the scene.
Right.
And maybe you think of some other things that you want to touch on or you want to describe, but really it's slowing down the point of the scene.
Right. I was thinking about it recently, listening to an art channel that I really like watching. And they were talking about how in paintings, painters often utilize these different aspects. And I'm not super into like all the technical terms of painting, but a lot of artists utilize sight lines and the way the lighting is falling to illuminate one character in the middle of the frame, or whatever the story in the picture they pick, like what is the main character of this painting, and then the lines in the painting will sort of lead to that subject. The most color might be used on that subject. The most light might be falling on that subject. And the reason artists have done that throughout time is to draw the viewer's attention to what the painting is actually communicating. Now, if everything in the painting, the foreground, the background, the main subjects were all bright colors, everything was just as much in focus, everything was just as well lit, you may not know where your eye should look. You would be like, okay, there's kind of a lot going on and it's really open to interpretation. I'm not really sure what I'm looking at, because the story has been lost, because our attention is now being drawn to so many things that our brain doesn't know where to look. It's like, are we supposed to be looking at the foreground? Are we supposed to be looking at these subjects here? Are we supposed to be looking at the background? And it's the same thing with writing. Yeah. We have to think about, what is the subject of this conversation? We have a few characters. They're in a discussion. What is the point of their discussion? And am I drawing the reader's attention to that point that's going to then move the story forward? Or are we getting distracted looking at this and that and the other thing?
Mm. Yeah. And also, like, whenever you mention something or describe something or have a character talk about something else, it's showing the reader like this matters because it's drawing your attention to it. So if it doesn't matter as much, then you're kind of putting the spotlight on that thing. And why does it matter? Like exactly. I always say on my channel, why does it matter?
What is the focus of this conversation? What's the focus of this dialogue? So first, we're going to start with a weak example. This is a little piece of flash fiction, and we're going to discuss it after we read the examples. So first, the weak example. "What are you doing in here?" I hissed, barely able to see in the dark room, lit only by the pale, glowing moon beyond the frosted bay window. "No one's supposed to come in here. You heard what Mrs. Swanson said." "Mrs. Swanson's hiding something," James cut in before I could finish. In one hand, he grasped a flashlight, and in its illuminating beam, I could just make out the features of his long, thin face. There was a curious glint in his deep brown eyes. "You won't breathe a word about this if you know what's good for you." As the moonlight drifted through the curtain lace and reached over the old wooden floors and mahogany furniture, something else caught my attention, a glint in his hand. His fingers were curled around a shiny brass skeleton key. It looked old, and James seemed almost reluctant to show it to me. "What is that?" I asked curiously. "I think it's the key to the attic," James whispered, glancing worriedly around the room and at the old ornate door leading out into the hallway through which I had just entered. I found it in one of the drawers. But we're not supposed to snoop. This isn't snooping, it's exploring. But he lifted his index finger to his lips, his deep brown eyes narrowing into an angry glare. Who's going to tell? You? So there's the first example. And we really wanted to make these examples feel like we just cracked open a book in the center and now we're reading some dialogue, because oftentimes that's what we do when we're deciding whether or not we want to read a book. We're going to say, who are these characters? What are they like? What's going on here? So there's a weak example. And you'll see on the screen that's in front of you now, if you're watching on the YouTube version, that there's some stuff highlighted. And those are the things that we're going to focus in on. We have a lot of things that we're focusing on in this example. So asking ourselves, like, what are we focusing on? What is the focus of the conversation? I'm not really sure exactly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because your attention is kind of drawn to a lot of different things in the room and the description of what's happening, the moonlight, the curtains, the furniture, and like a lot of things are being having our attention drawn to them.
Right. So like in a book versus like a film or painting, we're not able to look at it and see exactly what the author is seeing in their mind. So we have to decide for ourselves, what are we looking at here? You know what I mean? We can only see what you're telling us. So each word is drawing our attention to that. We're looking at the moonlight. The room is dark. We're seeing the glowing moon. Now we're outside. The moonlight coming in. We're talking about the furniture. We're talking about what kind of furniture. It's mahogany furniture. The floors are old. We're talking about a lot of the setting. So there's quite a few things that our attention's being brought to in this example here. Now we're going to move on to the tight example, the strong example. What are you doing in here? I hissed, feeling my way through the darkness. No one's supposed to come in here. You heard what Mrs. Swanson said. Mrs. Swanson's hiding something, James cut in before I could finish, his face ghostly in the beam of his flashlight. You won't breathe a word about this if you know what's good for you. A brass skeleton key glinted in his clenched hand. What is that? I think it's the key to the attic, James whispered, his eyes fixed on the door as if afraid someone would walk in at any moment. I found it in one of the drawers. But we're not supposed to snoop. This isn't snooping, it's exploring. But he pressed a finger to his lips, his eyes slitted. Who's going to tell? You? So as you can see in that example, we have a lot less words going on, but there's still a lot of flavor. There's a lot of mood. There's a lot of mood to what's happening. We see that it's a dark room because we're feeling our way through the darkness. So what we can shorten up a dialogue tag from barely able to see in the dark room, lit only by the pale glowing moon beyond the frosted bay window, to feeling my way through the darkness. And I already see it's a dark room. There's lots of stuff. There's lots of furniture that we're like feeling our way through this dark, kind of clunky space.
Right. Yeah.
But we don't need to be like the furniture, the moonlight, the bay window, the frosted bay window, the curtains, the floors. This was something I wrote in a few minutes, and I'm just like, okay, let's pick a couple characters and put them in conversation with each other, and then really pay attention to, number one, what is the focus of the conversation, and then go down the rest of the list. We're going to move on to the next point now, which is using tags. Now, this is something that is so important in dialogue, because you're going to be using it all the time.
All the body language and different transitional pieces happening between, like, during the conversation, which can either make or break it, because it can really enhance it, or it can slow it down so much that you're like skipping the tags. So if you find that, like, this is a good question to ask your betas too. If you as the reader are skipping tags, then they really don't need to be there. Or they're so much slowing down the dialogue that your brain is just like going past them, because we don't care about that. We just care about the dialogue. So you have to keep that sense of each tag mattering, each tag having a purpose. And the points here that we've written down is that your tags should let your reader know who is speaking and add meaning or enhance the description of what's happening. So it obviously it depends on the situation, right. But I'll let you read the example so that we can get a better understanding of this.
We're going to start with the weak example for using dialogue tags to give you a little bit of a feel for what this is like, some of our process. The steps creaked as I followed James uneasily up the old attic staircase, trying my best to remain as silent as possible. We shouldn't be doing this, I whispered, biting my lower lip anxiously. I have a bad feeling. We promised that we would stay in our rooms. James turned around and looked at me, shining the beam of his flashlight into my face. You go back to bed then, he snapped. I'm not scared of some old attic. He turned around once more and continued to climb. I swallowed hard, still frozen where I was, my fingers clutched around the railing. But what if the rumors are true? I whispered, my voice uneven. What if there really is a ghost? James grunted. I'm not afraid of ghosts. They aren't real, Tara. He paused and cast me a look over his shoulder. Like I said, you don't have to come with me. I shook my head and forced myself to continue up the stairs. No, I said. If you're going, I'm going. So there's tons of dialogue tags in that, like loads, to the point where I had to read this over a few times to be able to read it smoothly because you're almost like faltering over the dialogue tags because there's so many. And this is actually a really good example because there's an action taking place, two people going up a staircase. That doesn't take much time. So therefore, when we're adding tags and having them communicate on the stairs, we don't want to be spending too much time getting them up the stairs because really we're slowing down this movement.
Right.
Something we want it to be quick. They're going upstairs. They're going to go find something in the attic. We don't want, he stopped on the stairs. I stop on the stairs. He continues, then he pauses, then he turns around, then he turns back around, then he looks over his shoulder at me. It's really slowing down this movement of going up the staircase.
And I know as a reader, a lot of times I skip dialogue tags for this reason because I just have to know who is saying what and if anything really important happens during, in between lines. And if it doesn't, then please don't slow down the story with more dialogue tags.
Exactly. So here's the strong version, the tighter version. The old steps creaked as we made our way up the attic staircase, quiet as mice. So see, right there, we were easily able to replace trying my best to remain as silent as possible to quiet as mice. Really quick, really snappy. We know exactly what that means. And it even adds a little bit more flavor than using all those words of trying to remain as silent as possible.
Right.
In this case, it also adds a little bit to the mood because you have spooky, attic, mice, all those things go together. Really, it tightens it. It just makes it tighter. We shouldn't be doing this, James. I bit my lip. We could easily take out, biting my lower lip anxiously because we already know she's anxious because she's biting her lip and we don't care that it's her lower lip. We already assume that. So little things like that, tighter. I have a bad feeling. We promised that we would stay in our rooms. James flashed his light over my face. You go back to bed then. I'm not scared of some old attic. But what if the rumors are true? I whispered unsteadily. We were able to easily replace. I swallowed hard, still frozen where I was, my fingers clutched around the railing, and then I whispered, my voice uneven, because we already understand her nervousness. She's faltering. She doesn't really want to go on this spooky adventure in the middle of the night up into the attic. We get that already without all those words. And it keeps the pace faster. But what if the rumors are true? I whispered unsteadily. What if there really is a ghost? I'm not afraid of ghosts. They aren't real, Tara. And like I said, you don't have to come with me. No, I shook my head. If you're going, I'm going. So we're getting them up the stairs much faster. We're not slowing down this action with so many tags, and we clearly understand who's talking, especially in this instance of only two characters going back and forth with each other.
I find it helpful watching examples like this where you're kind of editing as you go so you can get a better idea of how to clean up your own work.